to go.
All set? Call the meeting order at 4 o'clock, May 30th. And the purpose of this meeting is for the budget for FY25. And I think, Dan, you wanted to start us up?
Possible. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
So I'm towards the back of the envelope. I think I'm like page 38 or 39.
The last department.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that again.
You're okay.
Obviously, it's a big increase over my existing budget as it stood. Most of the lines stay flat except for just wages for staff. Over the last year, we were the beneficiary of a pretty substantial grant that we did not have access to this year. That's what allowed us to operate at our cost last year as we ballooned in numbers really quickly. That along with the increase in minimum wage, which is what we pay, that was a huge chunk that we had to eat on our end to be able to pay staff. To maintain ratios, the math here put me at the budget that I proposed to keep safe ratios for our kids. So that's pretty much all of it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, just the overall, this is the biggest increase we had out of any department in the city, but it was mainly because of safety reasons. We had to fund to keep the minimum staffing ratios that we had. But overall, other than what Dan just said or what's included in his narrative that he's put there too, it was all worth it in the end, so we kept it as requested.
Our basic staffing models, we put a coordinator in each building because we run on 2 locations now, just based on our size. We run 5 different ages in terms of groups. So across those, we have a supervisor that helps build out the content within those, and then I obviously oversee all of it. We also added in a budget line there where we're going to share a nurse with the school departments. I think ultimately they're going to hire it. We will reimburse from our accounts to have a nurse on site. That way we can distribute medication to kids, which is something we've never been able to do, which is a big deal for us. Yeah. Though we first aided CPR everybody, but we do have students who require daily medication in school, and then they get to summer camp and they can no longer be provided that medication, which makes succeeding in summer camp very challenging. So having a nurse on site to be able to distribute medication, in addition to, a nurse is better to deal with a bee sting than a 16-year-old kid that just learned first aid. So that makes sense.
I just want to take a minute. First of all, look, what you do should not go unnoticed, and it's highly appreciated.
Appreciate that.
There was a vision along, maybe 15, 20 years ago for this, for Gardner High School to be alive. And, what you're doing through summer camps and youth development should not go unnoticed. And if a budget's deserving, I feel as though this one absolutely is. But I'll open it up for questions to either of the two of you.
I'm just sort of new to the city, to this process. I'm wondering, is the your position, is that year round or is it just the summertime thing? Is there any kind of rec stuff that happens outside of the summer?
Yep. So I'm a year-round employee. A percentage of my salary is paid for by the school. A percentage is paid for by the city. I have rec programming that goes year-round, though the lion's share of the rec work is the summer camp. 400 kids in the summer camp is very different than, Biddy basketball, we have 200 kids that show up for that. The various soccer programs that we run, baseball clinics that we run, softball clinics we run through the rec department, that happens year-round, and we've piloted other programs that have worked, some that haven't, but that rec department umbrella does exist year-round.
So, your position with the city, and then you have your athletic director position
Correct.
At the high school.
Yep.
And what is what else? How much of this crosses over? Obviously you have your duties at the school, right? And then, but then there's these things outside. Is there additional funds outside of, I guess, outside of your salary, that goes into, that comes from the school department budget?
Not for the recreational programming stuff, the school doesn't pay for any of that.
Okay.
So, any equipment, and that equipment is shared between the two, given the situation where we don't wanna have to buy duplicate stuff. And when we run a basketball clinic, I'll use high school basketball, so then I don't have to buy a second set of basketballs and waste the money on that, and, so there is some crossover that exists there, but paying for staff all comes from this line, paying for my equipment for summer camp exclusive to that comes from this line, I guess.
Sorry, question.
Yeah.
So on, in here it says, I think it says like $30,000 for your salary. Is that, so, is that, that, you're saying that that's a percentage of, is that a percentage of your total salary?
It's not calculated as a percentage of my salary, that's just what is paid by the city.
Yeah.
So if my salary were to go up, the city's contribution stays, that's always been the city's contribution to my salary.
It is something that we probably should be looking at doing, because the school department, as they increase the athletic director position, we've stayed the same ever since that position's been created, so it has been a decreasing percentage of the director's overall salary. And it's actually one of the positions that doesn't get a cost of living adjustment, or hasn't historically gotten it throughout the several years that it's been in existence, but so we haven't kept up with it, but it's where we've been at now.
In terms of my work within that, it's a little offset, so the bulk of my work for summer camp starts in January, right? Like I really do start digging into summer camp work in January while I'm still actively an athletic director in charge of basketball season, hockey season, and prepping for a spring season. The irony is, once summer camp starts, I'm pretty much done with summer camp and I'm prepping for fall sports, so it's all offset. But that's just the nature of planning versus boots on the ground work.
Just out of curiosity, do you get a lot of kids that are not in Gardner Public Schools, like Sizer kids and like parochial schools that are Gardner residents, or are they predominantly coming from within the district?
For summer camp as employees?
The summer in general, yeah,
No,
summer,
Participants?
yeah.
So the participants are, it's open to students that are Gardner residents or Gardner students, and that includes Holy Family students. So we basically, if they go to school in Gardner, we accept them into the program. Or if they live in Gardner, we have several kids who live in Gardner but go to school in Leominster, because maybe there's family there or whatever it might be. And then we do have a handful of kids that started in our very, very beginning of this, that started the summer camp, that we would never kick them out based on us having to put parameters in, but when we started summer camp with 40 kids, we didn't really have a lot of rules. And there were a handful of kids that started with us that were either staff kids or not, they didn't fit either of those criteria, that we've allowed to continue to be part of that. But we don't accept new students in that don't fit those requirements.
I have a few questions, unfortunately, largely due to the fact that I could not find them in the narrative because it was incomplete. So hopefully next year, especially, in a budget that is almost doubling, in a year that we're trying to cut $13 million out of our budget, everything has to be looked at, right? So hopefully next year we can see, because I do have questions, because this is a good program that we hear a lot of good things about it, and it pays dividends, not only for the kids that participate in it, but also the ones that work it, having that life experience, right? So remind me, when did this program start in the city for?
2018, I believe.
2018, and with 40 kids?
Yeah, it was 40 kids total, it was 2 groups of 20.
No, because I wonder how much thought is being put into the sustainability of this program. You're saying that we're approaching or over 400 kids participating this year?
We just hit 300. We have our big push really comes as parents realize that school's about to be let out and they forgot to sign them up or don't know what they're doing. I think we'll hit close to 400 at some point this year.
Okay.
Would be my guess.
Because the numbers aren't in the narrative, has it steadily gone up? Is this a peak? Can we expect demand to taper? I ask these questions because I'm worried about, I really do want to fund this program fully to make it, appropriate, safe for the students and the kids in our community. But next year we're going to be approached with a $250,000 recreation department budget. At what point is it unsustainable where it's kind of its own success has brought its failure 1 year?
I mean, that's So since its inception, the timing of this program, the way budget forecasting works, it's always just sort of been a race to zero and hoping that we fund it to get there. I've been very open about that since the beginning, where we started with 40 and went to 80 to 120 to 250 to COVID year to over 300 to over 4, I think we hit 400, but it's a forecast, it's a guess. And we don't have, there's no parallel to compare it to. There's no one local to us that does something to this scale that we can match it to that says, based on forecasting in a city our size in central Massachusetts, like there is no comp for this.
Let me
my
ask it
concern.
a different way. At what point is your high water mark? At what is the max where you have to, hey, we have to unfortunately turn kids away or point them to different programs in the community that are available?
I don't know. I don't have one. To be perfectly fair, we've exceeded everything I ever expected us to do in the first place.
It's a good problem to have, right?
It is a good problem to have. The reality is we are very inexpensive, where we are inexpensive. The vision of this program originally was to make it as accessible as possible. It was replacing what was a free program that was funded by the federal government at one point with the Summer Up program. That went away as we kind of came in. The spirit of it was accessibility. I've been pretty open about that. It was pretty open when this all came to be initially. But no, I haven't put a cap on it. I don't know if 400 is the number that we hit, and the first 400 kids that sign up were done going forward, and that's the best way to budget it. It's never been a discussion I've really taken a part in. It's always been, we hire as we enroll, as we project, and we get close, and then we spend down to zero, because that's what it costs.
To your point, the challenge is to kind of put those parameters in place as we move forward.
I think that's what I'm getting at here. This is, I think we should really examine anytime we look at a budget and we say, hey, we've received grants in the past. We don't have access to those grants anymore. The city should pay for those grants only, because it's all a balance, right? We have to consider the pensioner whose taxes go up every year and balance the needs of services and what our tax bills are. And with inflation where it's at, I think it's really great that Gardner families have a program that is financially accessible. I just want to make sure that we're taking into plans and making action to ensure that the program stays successful at a sustainable rate.
The program itself, when we had our initial conversation, I presented it as a couple of options. I said, this is what needs to be budgeted in our current cost structure to create sustainability for where we think we're going to get to. And to be perfectly frank, if we blow up to 600, we have a big problem, right?
Right.
We have a big problem. That would be a ridiculous jump in terms of enrollment, in terms of what we would have. I don't think there's any way to predict something like that. Or increase what we charge per family. Like that's the decision, one way or the other. We either cap it, we fund it more, or we increase our charge for it, right? So like
in the future, you may have to cap it and charge a little bit more.
Correct. I mean, absolutely. Last year, we were fortunate to have that grant come through. And I was pretty open in saying we can't rely on that. I think that's actually in my narrative. I cannot rely on that grant, which is why I'm requesting more funds. And the funds there really do cover a pretty good umbrella of, like, if we hit 350 to 450, right in that range, we have enough staff to expand within those spaces.
Right. Your narrative, there's a part that says we relied on grant funding for last year. So that's where a lot of my concern stems from. We applied for the grant, we didn't receive it again. Did we not apply for the grant?
It was not presented to us. So that grant,
You have to be invited to apply.
Yeah, that grant was given to us at the beginning, saying we're not gonna have enough applicants, there's overflow with the summer program, be willing to take. We applied for that grant, got approved for it, and were able to expand our hiring and our enrollments accordingly. So we had space to operate there.
And your narrative doesn't cover, because I know the Boys and Girls Club of Gardner, it's my understanding they do not have a summer program deferential to your program. Any terms of sharing capability resources, partnership to help ease the burden?
There's been some discussion back and forth between us and the Boys and Girls Club in the past. To be perfectly frank, preserving the integrity of the quality of work that we do at the summer camp, I'm comfortable with the path that we're pursuing in terms of operating independently.
Okay, and just to be clear, like, this is a substantial budget increase,
Mhm.
warranted, right? And
Mhm.
this is a $70+ million budget, we're talking about
Yep.
$60,000 for this increase, whatever.
Yeah, for the
Whatever it
increase,
may be, so it's, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, and it is needed to, you know, there has been minimum wage increases, we have other department heads here who are also struggling with labor, increases in salaries, so it's not questioning the program, I want to be very clear, not questioning the program, how it's run, just how are we planning for sustainable, operation of this program moving forward, because it's important, we don't want to have a lot of families rely on this, and then all of a sudden, budgets come through, you know, it's a bad year, we have to take away the program, that's what worries me.
Yeah, oh yeah, I fully agree. In the spirit of what the program was built as and what I was employed to do, right? When this originally came to be, I was employed within this role to create a program that was accessible to our kids. Raising the prices is going to create accessibility issues, substantial ones. It already has, and increasing what we have to last year, I had families opt out, drop out, couldn't afford it, and that was with a small increase. So the reality is, the hard question asked right now is, this is the type of increase that's required to run the program at the scale that it's currently at and where it in the short term could project to go. Without this, there is no sustainability of this program in the way that it was intended to be built. If this budget were not to be approved or not to exist, we would have to double prices. Is most likely where we'd end up, which would, once, it would kill the program, right? So for the program to run the way that I was hired to run it, which is within a cost structure that's accessible to the demographic within Gardner, this is the cost structure that I'm working within. If that direction were to change and accessibility wasn't a priority, then we would be talking about budgeting this and funding it in a very specific way. But this program, we're talking about over the course of 6 years, a program that started with a budget that's housed 40 kids. We've increased 1,000% since its onset, and this is the first increase that we've ever requested. Right? We've managed within all of this to find and resource ourselves in a way to never have to request this. And after growing by 1,000%, I think it's a reasonable time to ask for it, or push back and say, or we can't run it in an accessible way because that's just the way costs work now. It's an entirely different landscape than it was, but I do think that it's fair to ask for these funds given how much it's grown and given that it's literally never been increased since the day that the program started. So that's where I am with that. Like, I understand the budget environment that we're in. If this is to be maintained as an accessible program by the city, this is how it has to be funded. So that, and it's just, I think we're saying the same thing there.
No, I do, and I think to cap the discussion, these are the questions that weren't answered in the narrative that I think are important for the public to know, how the money's being spent, what the plans are, what our policy positions are, because I certainly support, and I think other members of this committee do too, is having accessible summer programs for the kids in Gardner. I think it's an important thing to have, with the mindset of running a sustainable and have it for years to come, so.
Are there any renewable grant opportunities that you know of, or that our grants department knows of, that we could apply for to kind of offset some of the costs? I mean in the future.
Not that we've seen for recurring grants. Every now and then, the Attorney General's office will do a summer youth employment grant where they'll pay for certain wages for summer employees, but that's, you get it for a year, you're ineligible the year after that, and it's very hit or miss as to how much money's in the program to begin with.
And the bulk of those grants are typically based and rooted in DESE, which means you have to hit certain eligibility requirements from an educational standpoint, and we are not a school-based program. I mean, we exist within the school, but we do not have an educational component. We're very open about that.
What happened to the summer up? Who funded that? Is that Massachusetts?
It was a federal grant.
The Mount got a grant from the Federal Department of Education that was cut,
Okay.
and no longer exists.
I just think we need to do to your point, do our due diligence if and when we do see a potential grant, and I know that we will. I know that we always stay ahead of that. Anything that can offset some of the cost. I personally, and I hear exactly what you're saying, because it makes sense. When you're building something, we kind of need to put a framework around it, and have for the future, and so we can predict what it's going to look like. I know talking to you this winter, you were like, it's gonna be crazy this summer, you know? But yeah, put a plan in place before us, and I appreciate that you do that. So. Any other questions for Dan?
No, I think we're starting to see this rec department program at the level, and it will not be funded at the level for a city of 21,000, so good work.
Thanks.
I just want to throw this out there. I did mention this in the welfare committee as well, where the recreation department is the only department that's cross-listed itself under both public service and public welfare. So I don't know if that's something that to take a look at before, but Rule 13 of the council rules determines what committee has oversight of which department, and the recreation department is actually listed under both. Where some have overlapped, you know, sub-departments or divisions of their departments, that full department is listed in 2 different places. So I don't know if that's something to take a look and see if we clean up in the future, or.
This program might be at a point where that makes sense to reevaluate, you know, if it's six years since
I think
its inception.
I think it
that,
starts this summer.
You know, that it should be a matter of pride that we can look at this, which
Yeah.
I think it is. So.
Yeah. No, just to throw it out there in case you watched the welfare committee meeting and you saw that they also reviewed this budget, it's because it's cross-listed.
Also to be clear, with just the way the budgeting works, this request is the request for the, this is a weird way to say this. We have to budget, we can't under budget. We will likely come in under this budget, is my guess. We don't budget for staff calling out of work, we don't budget for a lot of those types of things. We don't spend it just to spend it, right? So the funds that we take in, we deplete our revolving account first before we deplete the city budget account that would be carried over. So this budget here, we won't spend this one down before we spend down our revolving account. The revolving account is what we ultimately take in as user fees. We get that to 0, and then we rely on the rest of the budget to pay for that. So if something is not taken in or not spent, we don't spend it just to spend it. And we don't keep high budgets in our revolving account.
What is it at? Do you know?
It's included in your big budget binders.
Yeah,
That's okay.
but it's going up every day because I'm taking budget payments right now. Like, it's
Excellent.
a big number right now that'll disappear pretty quickly, so.
Good. It's a good summer.
Really let him go?
I'm so sorry, I hate to run.
Get out.
All right, appreciate it. What's up? Yeah, see you tonight. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Where do we want to go next? Who wants to go next?
We're just going to order in the spreadsheet?
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Well, then you can leave.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Mr. Fiordo.
I don't think I'm next.
I think we're going back.
Really?
Yeah.
Look at the,
No,
They're looking at the spreadsheet, not the list on the cover letter, that's why.
I'm looking at the list that.
Yeah.
So am I up?
Yeah.
You're up.
Okay, great. Conservation, so the conservation agent salaries is a split between the planning board for the planning and conservation agent. And so it's half the salary there. Everything else is pretty much level funded. There's been a decrease in the professional development travel by about 1,000. Not too worried about that, only because the conservation has other funds they can use for professional development upon approval of the Conservation Commission. So, and that's been done before by the conservation planning agent. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Can answer any questions?
Just to the overview, and I've said this at every committee as well, the budget's built with all union contractual items moving forward, and then a 3% cost of living adjustment for all of our non-union employees. The reason for the 3% rather than our usual 2% is that in my 4 years as mayor, we've negotiated every single one of our union contracts. Those union contracts have received both the general cost of living adjustment, but also changes to their wage scales in terms of their longevity steps that our non-union employees do not have. So there was increases in compensation both for the cost of living adjustment, but also for adjusting what those steps are and the percentages between those steps, so that if an employee stays longer, they get paid back. And while it's something that we are working towards getting a non-union step scale, with the rates that we currently have and working with, you know, some type of plan for the future, it's something our non-union employees currently do not have. So that's why doing that 3% really brings parity to what our union employees have received versus what our non-union employees have received in terms of adjustments to something other than just your usual 2% cost of living adjustments, where they all received wage matrix adjustments on top of their cost of living adjustments. So there was 2 forms of compensation increases for our union employees, but not for our non-union employees. So that extra percentage is in recognition of that. It's small, but it's something, and it's, at least we can do that. So you'll see that's reflected in as the 3% cost of living adjustment for this half of the conservation planning agent salary.
I guess it's just a question for the overall budget. It says department budget, mayor budget. Are those numbers combined to the sal?
No, so the department budget is what the department requested. And the mayor's budget is what I had to either reduce or change for the final budget. So the final budget number is the mayor's budget.
Okay. So I guess one of the things I'm confused about in here is, you know, I look at salaries, I know that it just seems really low. Like, where is the other part of the salary? I mean, for someone who.
Planning board.
No, I mean for this one, I'm just talking in general. Like, if I look at all of these, right, like Dane's job and Rob's job, right, it seems like it's like half a salary,
yes.
right?
All right.
All
So,
right, that's not just,
yeah.
I'm kind of like, oh, wait a minute, why is this?
Your observation is correct.
Okay. So certain positions, Dane, Rob, the GIS coordinator, business manager,
Me,
yeah, Trevor too, yeah. The Board of Health, certain, to have money that goes for their salaries from different accounts. And that's because Trevor is the executive director of the GRA and community development planning director. Dane oversees DPW, water, sewer. Rob works a little bit with water and sewer accounts as well.
Okay,
a little bit.
I see, that's why it's repeated in different places.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why when you look at the budget votes that are there, you have the orders that are appropriating the funds, but you also have the compensation ordinance. So that's the grid that you'll see that this position title makes this much, and it actually breaks down this much from the general fund, this much for this much for, and it breaks it down so you'll see what comes from each department there, and you'll see what the final compensation package is. That ordinance is what sets what we pay our employees at.
Director Greer, I know you had commented, the only line item question I had was the professional development and travel, because the conservation agent is a young professional and is new to his career. I wanted to make sure that we're supporting them in their development. Are you confident that the money put aside in the conservation committee budget is enough? Because if it is just $1,000, and I say just $1,000, but it's a third of what was asked for.
Yeah.
Is what's being approved for something significant in a role that we've had turnover in, so I want to make sure that we are supporting them.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat confident. I think the mayor's reasoning behind the drop was based on previous
Historical
years.
trends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I just, because of the amount of turnover I've had in that position, I don't think that funding has been utilized as much as it should have been in the past. It typically comes down to the personnel, the person itself that fills the position, and what they want to pursue for professional development. I'm always on top of them, you know, trying to encourage them to take advantage of different professional development courses and workshops and things like that. So we'll see. I mean, we'll play out this year. I feel confident that if there is something conservation planning related, that we'll have the money available to that person. It's not as easy going through the Conservation Commission, I'll be honest. They're not always willing to go with their money for some reason. I don't know why, but they do have plenty of money in there, wetland protection fees and things like that. Funds are available, yeah. So, but, you know, I think this is, again, with Doug in the position now, we'll see what type of programs he, you know, gets involved with,
And that'll help us when we build the budget next year too.
Yeah,
to
right.
that we
See
see
what's
what demand is
actually
there.
pulled.
Yeah.
Good, because I think it's important to support, support our employees. The one other area, I noticed this budget doesn't have professional services line item. Is that something that just historically hasn't been needed, or is there no instances where the conservation agent might need an intermediary, such as like a DEP sidewalk or something of that nature,
That mainly comes out of the Concom's.
It's out of the
budget.
budget? Okay.
And/or a third-party review would be paid for by the applicant.
Okay, all right. So it's covered. Good, those are my questions.
Anything else? So next on the list, engineering.
Engineering. So for fiscal year '25, my budget is basically level funded. The mayor had asked of department heads that we look at possible
Thank you, Trevor.
reductions in our budget. So in looking at that, I did take, there's 5 line items mostly for low costs line items, off supplies, professional development and travel, minor equipment, information technology, repairs and maintenance, where I was able to cut those small accounts substantially, 25%, 15% in some cases, to bring my operational costs down by 3%. So outside of salary and wages, I reduced my overall budget 3%. So nothing notable there. They're all accounts that I went back and looked, and historically, I didn't see a problem with that. So for the most part, level funded, other than that 3% reduction.
My best there, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your narrative. It was very thorough and easy to follow, so I certainly appreciated that. The 2 areas that I saw deltas were with professional services and the EPA.
Yep.
I know you had noted them in the narrative, but just to cover them publicly here.
Yes, so in my requests versus the budget moving forward, under our EPA, NIPD's MPDES line item, we historically fund $40,000 a year. This is for professional services related to, or other services related to implementing our stormwater permit through EPA. So the reason I had a notable increase request, part of our permit is that the city, over the coming years, we have to retrofit our municipal properties with stormwater treatment in a number of ways. We're currently designing a demonstration facility that coincidentally I'll be leaning on this year's budget to pay for construction when we get to that point. But moving forward, the city's obliged to do this under our permit. So, and then I've talked to the mayor about this, and I knew that would be a difficult item to fund. It was a huge increase, but mostly just a talking point as to the future moving forward. So that's what that was. And then the other one was professional services, which that's more of a wish list item for the department. We run into a lot of instances, using the Uptown Rotary as an example. You design it, you pay for construction services through another professional, another consultant. The hope there was we have a lot of projects that we'd like to get on tip lists, which is expensive engineering cost. So again, there's not a pressing need there for this one, but it's something I'd love in the future. It's a big ask, so I understand, but that was the reasoning behind it.
For the EPA, NPDES, is that, what specifically is that? I see this, I looked it up, natural pollutant discharge elimination system.
Sure, that's.
What specifically, where is it specifically done and used?
That is, every community or communities that have a MS4, which stands for municipal, it's 4 M's, and I can't think of it off the top of my
Sewer
head.
separation.
Municipal sewer separation.
There's 4 S's in the title of it.
Not 4 M's, 4 S's. It's an acronym for the stormwater permit we have through the EPA. I think going back to 2015, 2016, the EPA this is nationwide, most communities who have an urbanized area have an MS4 area, which the goal of with these permits is to enhance and clean up stormwater, waterways, ponds, lakes. So Gardner does have a permit through the EPA. We file a yearly report with the EPA. We're required to do certain things over the lifetime of the permit. So that's what that is. So the city's obligated to do this while the permit's active. So the money that's in that budget line item is typically used mostly for, in the past, we were testing our stormwater outfalls. We use a consultant to do that. The consultant is doing portions of the work for us year to year that is beyond what I can do. So that's what that money is for. It's basically compliance for our MS4 program.
Municipal separate storm sewer system.
Thank you.
And does the, is there an expectation that might, the cost of, or the line item might increase with the new regulations from the federal government around PFAS?
Not for PFAS per se, but my expectation is we will, as we move forward with the requirements of the permit year to year, we will need more funds.
Federal government doesn't care about costs.
Yeah. But PFAS could potentially down the road become part of it. PFAS normally is more drinking water and wastewater, not necessarily stormwater.
Oh, you said, but you also said to clean up waterways and which would include our drinking water, right, in like Crystal Lake or.
Right, but we don't, when I say clean up waterways, it's the runoff from stormwater, which isn't typically, PFAS is a problem. It's found in our drinking water, well, it's not found in our drinking water, fortunately. It's, generally speaking, most communities, it's found in wastewater and drinking water. We're fortunate we don't have it in drinking water.
So you presented a budget of 215,000 and we ended up on 40.
Yes.
At 40. So can you just talk a little bit about what more you wanted to do from a budget example?
Again, under just that, the EPA NIPD's line item, it was mostly looking forward into the future for design and construction of those retrofits.
I apologize.
Nope, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Any further questions?
No, thank you for that report.
Thank you.
You might need it.
You can stay.
We got the small department
Stay.
next. Dane,
Okay.
you have the floor.
As Bob had mentioned, the mayor had asked us to reduce our budget by 3% heading in. So the budget that I presented to you was to meet that 3% reduction. I believe I wrote in my narrative, even a level funded budget is actually a reduction, probably by 3 to 4% because the cost of everything goes up. So this, as again, the budget I presented is not necessarily the department needs, but it's at least it met the requirement. First page is basically salaries and things to do with salaries. As you go on to the second page, I'd like to point out that right now, overtime, I don't think I've come to the council probably in 10 years to ask for overtime, to offset the cost of overtime. And what I do is because there's a deficit, or I should say, there's an abundance of salary left in my budget, I'm paying overtime out of my salary line item. I just shift it down because it's a salary account.
Salary.
So, I'm paying for, so just, moving forward, as vacancies get filled, hopefully, I may have to go at some point to the council to ask for overtime, so that would be.
Hope it's not a strategy, Dane. When vacancies get filled.
Correct.
Again, it's pretty much level funded, down through the budget.
We are meeting with both DPW unions on Monday to negotiate their contracts that expire on July 1st for the next 3 fiscal years. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with a little more marketable that to try, so that when those positions get filled, they're marketable positions. So that's our main plan as we move forward to that, is to start with the negotiations process on that. We do have the proposals from both of the unions. We have had initial conversations with the union presidents on those, and without going too far into the negotiation process itself, I think we'll be having a good product at the end of it. And the paving money, that's one that, this is supplemental paving money. I do want to just make that clear. What it is we have in our city's financial policies right now that in addition to the Chapter 90 funding that we receive annually from the state, which is around $600,000 a year, we appropriate 10% of certified free cash to go to a road resurfacing. Since I have been mayor, we have always done over that 10% by at least an additional 2, so I think the lowest we've ever done is 12% over. Then additionally, on top of that free cash and the Chapter 90 funds, we normally supplement it by $150,000 in the budget. Just to help balance the budget, we cut that out this year with the goal of putting something back in at some point, either next year, if we can have something in the future, or see how new growth comes in. Right now, new growth is estimated at $250,000. New growth, again, is the new construction or properties that weren't taxable before but have become taxable during the fiscal year. Last year, we were pleasantly surprised. The new growth came in at almost $400,000 when we had it budgeted at $200,000. But you can't really rely on that until you get an actual certification, because you're guessing how many patios and add-ons and in-laws and everything else get constructed throughout the course of a year, that if it doesn't happen, you're at the creek, because now you're cutting from the budget mid-year. So hopefully we'll be able to add some of that in. But where, since July of 2020, and I only know that because that's how I have info on, because that's when I took office, we paved 20% of the roads in Gardner. Of the 100 miles of road we have, we paved just over 20 miles. So I think we've made a good dent so far that I'm not too concerned about not having that extra 150,000. That said, the Commonwealth did just create a new what's called Rural Roads program that is meant to supplement Chapter 90 funds. And Gardner actually fits into their calculations, so we're waiting to see what that means for us. So that is also providing supplemental paving funds. The Fair Share Amendment that was adopted by the voters at the last state election also provides about additional $300,000, $315,000 in paving funds to the city annually to supplement our Chapter 90 funds too. So the money's there, it's just coming from different pots.
And getting people to do it.
Exactly.
So I assume that the union, the contract negotiations, they include, I mean, that's what you're alluding to, they include the positions that are vacant?
Yes.
Right, and so that, in your report, you talk about $150,000 to $200,000 increase for wages, right, to
That was my
try.
estimate, yeah.
Right, is that based on sort of, you know, what union is kind of negotiating in terms of like, this is how much we?
No, that was a market rate analysis.
Okay.
That's not really what they're.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I did was I took a look at other municipalities and tried to place what they got paid,
Okay.
and took our staff and tried to bring their numbers up to where to fit into other communities, and that's the rough number, would have been about 150 grand to get them up to.
This is just something I thought about. I don't know. It just popped in my head when I was going through this. Has the city done sort of like a job fair with like you have with just city openings? Yeah.
Not with just city openings. That's interesting.
Yeah. It just I don't know why it just popped in my head. I was like, oh, to kind of just market it to the community and see, here are the openings to come and meet the various departments and talk about positions. Come with your resume. Sort of like what we have it at the Mount, right, for our students. It's a job fair, students come and they, meet employers. I wonder if just the city of Gardner. I mean, just something I just floated in my head when I was at home looking at this. Just an idea. All right, I'm gonna take a look here if you have any questions. I have more questions.
Just looking at the deltas again, could you speak to road maintenance? And I noticed it was $30,000 under department request. What is involved with that line item?
Road maintenance is basically our pothole patching, or for catch basin collapses and we needed to go out and buy frames and gates and things like that. So it's, that's more or less, I asked for an increase based because of the cost of the increase, so.
Right.
You'll see in the revenue section of your big budgets, But there's a whole section in there about paving and road resurfacing and road repair too, just because that's I think we get the most phone calls about those. So I wanted to make sure that there was a separate section in the full budget document.
It's not just phone calls.
Oh, and emails and everything else too, there, Counselor, I get it. But that way, at least, it paints a picture of what we've done and why and where the money comes from.
The cemetery maintenance, I know this is another large delta. Do we have like a revolving or perpetual care account with our municipal and cemeteries?
Yes, there is a perpetual care, I believe it's $500 to purchase a plot. I believe 2/3 of it goes to perpetual care, and 1/3 of it goes to the city.
Right.
So that's where that number comes up, but you typically get about $9,000, which now doesn't even buy a lawnmower, believe it or not.
Right, right,
Because they've
yeah.
gone up to almost 14 or 15 grand.
Yeah.
The request that I had for 250 grand was.
They ought to ride themselves.
Yeah.
You just need a remote control.
I wish they did ride themselves. The request for 250, that was for columbarium.
Columbarium,
Yeah. Had a hard time with it.
Every time.
yes. It doesn't come out right.
This snow and ice, so I see 2023 is over $1 million, 2024 is 600,000, right? And what we budgeted 300, is that like a typical thing that,
Yes, that's usual.
so it's like double, triple, right? It's,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
state law says that what you budget in snow and ice on a given fiscal year, that is the minimum amount you must budget in the following fiscal year. So we purposely budget low, because it also says in state law that that's the only account that, actually the current only account that we can deficit spend in, and can amortize over the course of 5 years. So say this year there was a 300, I could actually use real numbers, there was $320,000 that we went over this year. If we wanted to, we could just spread that out and pay that off over the life of the next 5 years, and it's less of a hit to the city that way, because you never know in a given fiscal year how much is gonna fall out of the sky when it snows and it's cold outside. Last year, we had a really rough winter where we had a lot of ice instances, so we had $1 million. This year, we didn't have as much. So that's one of those reasons why we purposely stay where we are, and then if we have to, we've historically filled it back in with free cash rather than spreading it out as an amortization over the course of a couple of years.
The perpetual care has about $78,000.
Oh, okay. And there's, I'm assuming, rules based on what you can withdraw and what have you. Only ask if that is also an item that historically hasn't been increased and now we're finding that
It's state law, but based on percentage of what you can charge per lot. So that perpetual care has been going on since 1910, and they were probably paying $5
Right.
for, so it's,
yeah.
I try to not touch it because you're just eventually gonna run out of money if you were to.
Exactly.
All of the revolving accounts are also included in the special revenue section, so you can see the balances on those too.
It's just such a big bind.
It is.
that
No, and it's
I
one of
gotta
those
get
things-
a dollar.
I'm not calling you
around.
out.
It's
It's
just
just,
working out every time you.
it's mainly for the benefit of the public who may watch this, just so they know where to find the numbers.
Very good.
It's this big.
question about the, so, where does, so I see the line for the $40,000 to pay for the tree work, outside service.
Yep.
I assume that, right, that work gets done, it's under forestry, is that what is it under Parks, Recs, forestry, that line? Okay, and what about the tree warden? Is that something, I don't see that listed in the
So the tree warden.
potential positions or vacancies or anything.
Yeah, this is the bane of our existence here. This
It's
is
like a
the
state
tree warden.
process, it's supposed to be a tree
It's a
warden.
state law that says that every municipality has to have a tree warden. The city code puts that under the auspices of the director of public works as the tree warden in his job description under the ordinances. So if we were to change that inanimate position, we actually need an ordinance change.
Okay.
We're
So
working
that's-
on the ordinance change.
Feel free to,
Yeah. We're working on the ordinance change. It's one of those that like we can't, because it's in the ordinance book and city law as a result, we can't contract around it because then we're violating our own statutes.
So are we violating state law by not having a tree warden, or is it okay?
Because it's
to
listed
put it
in
on-
his job
under stuff?
description,
Okay.
we meet the requirements of the state law.
All right, cool, thank you. Sorry,
excited about the playgrounds.
Um,
Gonna get playgrounds.
You never had an OC?
No,
A lone stray tree fell right on the new playground equipment we just put in 2 years ago.
really?
I have a couple
Should
of
we
questions.
go for it? Yeah.
Oh, would you mind update? Yeah, we'll move to playgrounds.
Well,
Like, I'm still.
Oh, you're still, oh, okay, sorry.
So,
Let's get a couple more.
where it says sludge landfill 2023, is that, what was that worth? And it's only, $2,668, but it also made me kind of question, where's the operating cost?
Is that under?
Oh, sorry, it's under DPW, like,
It's the line number.
line number, sorry. Was 759.
Oh, you're,
Sewer.
he's
That's
in
under
the.
the
Oh, it's under sewer,
Sewer.
sorry,
Sewer.
oh, sorry about that. Oh, I'll get there when we get there.
Now we can go to Parks and Playgrounds.
Holiday light, that's the downtown lighting for, in line the park lighting.
I think we'll have a little less this year with certain trees not being there anymore, but unfortunately.
Gotta replace the tree.
We have a donor to replace the Christmas tree, so
Oh,
that
very
will
good.
be replaced.
Very good.
Is this stuff gonna be ground down? You were talking about in front of that,
Did you have
the building,
questions, or were you-
is it, were we talking about the one that's like where the?
The big Christmas tree behind the Spanish American War Monument, across from the office.
Oh, okay, I thought you were talking about where the coffee shop is going.
Oh, no, those stumps should be being ground, I think.
My playground improvements question was the delta between 3,000 and 20,000, and if there's a plan to fill that gap with free cash or a grant.
That was to replace
Well,
as much as we could.
the last year's budget was 20 grand, so there's not a drop in,
Yeah, that was the,
it's level funded, that was my request, because I wanted to do
Right,
the
Yeah,
next
but your
phase.
initial request.
The request of $30,000.
I believe community development's working, or they've
we're
been.
waiting to hear back.
So we're waiting to hear back on grant
For a
availability?
grant.
Yep, okay.
And believe it or not, 300 grand doesn't go very far with playground equipment. It's
Is
crazy.
there a specific playground that you're looking to move first on, or is it?
OC, because we took down that large wood structure, so I'd like to make that a little larger for different age groups.
Very good.
Do we? So you, I'm just thinking like, from a playground perspective, like, if we have, do we have, like a city plan, like, for the future?
That would fall under the master plan. We did get that grant from the Commonwealth last year. The matching funds for it are actually not going on this Monday's agenda, but being submitted by me for the 17th agenda. So that would be included in part of that, but it's part of the open space and recreation plan.
Right, okay, yeah, that's right, gotcha.
Sorry, go ahead.
We're almost in the sewer.
I was gonna ask about the Jackson playground. I've heard complaints from residents about it being in disrepair. I don't know if that's something that's,
I've heard graffiti complaints that are there.
yeah.
We are still in talks, I mean, not even talks, the application's been submitted to tear down School Street School and help open up that area and make it more, because that playground, when it was put in, I believe, in my personal opinion, too far back, so it's away from the road, it's away from any, it makes it easy as a target for vandalism.
Right.
So once that building is gone and that becomes a new parking lot and area for the park itself, I think it opens up a lot better and makes it more.
Yeah.
That's the one with the skate park, right?
Yes.
'Cause I see kids at that skate park all the time. It's
Yeah,
really,
the playground's right up against the school.
It's way
Yeah.
back, it must have was built toward the school.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Hey, one of the things I'm worried about is bears in my neighborhood, and so can we just make sure that the water for grass is, well, I'm not
Put a lot of bird feeders on it.
I don't wanna be walking by, you know? That thing was huge. All right, sewer expenses.
Okay. Well, again, the upper part are salaries and overtime, repairs and maintenance. I think one of the large increase was repairs to mains under the sewer expansion. We went from 100 grand to 200 grand. I'm gonna try to actively reline some sewer pipes, so that would be covering that cost. At the wastewater plant, our flows are slowly increasing, and if they get to 4 million gallons a day for 3 months, we have to do a study, so I'm trying to avoid that, so I'm trying to reduce the flow out into the field, out in the collection system to try to bring that flow down, so that's something we're gonna be taking a look at. So that was the increase for that.
Does that involve the, like televising the lines too,
Yep.
and then?
Televising the lighting and then they line.
Because that basically pays for itself too with
Yes.
water.
Chemical, electricity.
Yeah.
You save it at the plant.
Right, so that's good to see that investment, very good.
Yeah, the lining prevents any like groundwater or any leaks from getting into that wasn't already in there.
As well.
Some of your line items in there, I put a automatic, I think it's a 3% increase, your chemicals, your energy and utilities, Veolia's contract, which is AWWTP contract operations, that's an actual contract cost to Veolia. There's one in water, there's one in sewer. I'm just trying to forecast. Their contract is based on the CPI, so a couple of years ago, I estimated it at 3%, we had an 8.1% CPI increase, so it's a guess, but it's a good guess.
Line 760, transfer to the general fund, that's what's called indirect costs. So there's certain costs that the enterprise fund can pay to the general fund, and that basically covers insurance reimbursement for those employees who are covered by the sewer department, any certain costs of the city auditor who oversees kind of things that are getting spent, the auditor, the treasurer, the purchasing director, certain positions that by law work to help oversee the enterprise account. So since they are paid for out of the general fund, the enterprise account reimburses the general fund for their services, since we have to keep them separate by law.
So open it up for questions.
So, to the question before line 759, what was this $2,668 for the sludge landfill? And then I guess second part of that is, where is the operating cost for, is the solid waste landfill, is that under the health?
That's
health, but the sludge landfill is under this budget. Is that this facility maintenance, like where's the operating cost for sludge landfill, and then what is that 2,668?
The operation cost for the sludge landfill is in Veolia's contract.
Oh, it's gonna be all this, okay.
The $2,688, I couldn't tell you what that was spent for.
It goes back to 23.
I wanna say it's, what I think it was if we had a contract with Woodard and Curran, who's currently doing our sludge landfill, and I asked for $290,000 and it was at $286,000, I think that's what that leftover is.
FY '23.
Yeah,
That's
so
the
it was
actuals.
22, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's actuals too, that's not what we budgeted for.
Right.
Yeah. I have no further sewer questions.
Yeah, maybe
No, actually.
okay. We will head on over to water expenses.
The water budget is structured similar to the sewer, almost exactly, mirrors it. Again, the upper part is a salary with overtime. Repairs to mains actually was a decrease from 200,000 down to 125. And the reason is actually we're gonna be doing the transmission main project. Hopefully, we can get the contractor in to do the project shortly. So I reduced my repairs to mains and actually made a request to repairs to mains in this current fiscal year to cover some of the contract costs to offset it, and also the paving that would be required to pave the road once it was excavated. Again, everything's pretty level funded.
When you take a look at repairing mains and planning out for whatever we have to do from a repairs, or from a replacement standpoint, do we take into, I'm sure you do, but take into consideration whether or not we're paid, we're planning to pave, or, so
Yes.
trying to be a little bit more proactive.
Working with Bob in the engineering department and the GIS coordinator, what we
Yeah.
did is we created a map of old pipes,
Yeah.
and we created a map of condition of streets, and we put them together, so it overlaid them, so we actually do have a map of that.
Because one of the things from a water perspective, and being in Ward 3 and not kind of talking about this right now, probably shame on me, but I think different parts of the city, the water, the quality is a little bit different. I feel as though when I was over on Brookside, I never had issues with like my water heaters or anything. But since I've moved to Church Street, I mean, I've replaced my hot water heater 3 times, and when I get, you know, the tech in, he's like, it's the water. But we test the water year after year.
It passes every.
I understand. Are we testing in the different parts of the city, or are
Yes,
we?
I believe it's, we were at one point testing in 60 sections of the city, and I think we got reduced down to 30.
Okay.
We do also add chemical orthophosphate to the water for corrosion.
When did we start doing that?
That
2019.
2019.
Yeah, so that's been going for a while.
And do
Which-
we increase or?
It would decrease corrosion.
You're right, but have we increased the amount that we've been adding?
No, I don't
I haven't had an
think so.
issue in like a year and a half, so.
No, it's been the same since 2019.
Good, okay, good. Just wanted to bring it up. And I know that's not budget related, but.
Because the city engineers here as well, can stay for this part. The dam inspections, we've talked about different dams
Yep.
in the town. I know other communities are also struggling with, you know, I don't want to say expired, but dams past their useful life. Is that a line item for just purely hiring out inspection services?
I can, yeah, this, under the dam inspection, so Rob's in charge of city dams, I'm in charge of water department dams,
Oh,
so
okay.
that covers Pearlie, Cowie, and believe it or not, Parker's Pond, which isn't a water department dam, but for whatever reason, I believe the water department somehow was owned that body of water.
Okay.
So I have to pay for that. These are just inspections. And
Okay.
it's at $7 grand. I think it's about $3 grand for an inspection to have somebody come out, just walk it, take a look at it, write a report. We literally just did one for Pearlie and Cowie. Like,
Does the maintenance of those dams as well, I assume, come out of water too? then, or-
Yep.
Okay.
What, if it's just general maintenance, like going out and cutting brush, going on either municipal grounds or the water department will go out and do that. If it comes to something like a larger project, I would have to obviously request funds to have that.
Say it was like 3,000 for a dam inspection?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a consultant coming out,
Yeah.
doing all the necessary paperwork with the state, so it's a service.
Yeah, got it.
Damn expensive.
That's right.
That's kind of why I would.
Puns intended.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, I didn't know that, actually, there was a separation.
What do you have, 7 dams of them, 6 or 7?
We have the whole South Gardner flood control projects, which is Wayside, there's several others, then I've got Betts Pond Dam, there's several. Coincidentally, talking about grants this morning, we're hoping to find money for a study of the South Gardner flood control project, to look at everything, and so it's always an ongoing thing, and the dams are rated differently, whether they're high or low hazard. Depends on that dictates how many inspections you do. It's either every 10 years, every 3 years, every 2 years. So we run the gamut of how often they get done. Out of my budget, my dams would come out of my professional services. I don't have a separate, there used to be a dam inspection line item, which went away at some point. But,
Okay.
yeah, so,
Before
yeah,
my time.
yeah, no, it was before my time.
Hey, yeah.
And also Crystal Lake type, which I forgot, because we're not mandated to inspect it, but I have inspected anyway.
That's the hill between Crystal Lake and Greenwood Pool.
Okay.
What does the acronym WPAT stand for? What are those?
That's Veolia's contract on the water side.
Oh, water stuff. So, there was a list of grants, 5 grants that were here. Is any of the funding from there used to offset, salaries and benefits? Just curious what.
No, we try not to, actually, there really is no salary and benefits
Written into that.
grant application, no, yeah, a lot of grants won't offer funds for salaries. They'll reimburse for existing salary line items for administering, a grant, but they won't provide new wages or supplement non-appropriated wages.
Tell you how to spend it.
Yes. Yeah, it's which in some ways is good. It helps make it so that we don't have a cliff that we have to go back and fill if we take salaries and one-time money and then make it so that they don't. But these grants that are listed here are really for actual capital improvement projects.
I think my final, just more comment, not a lot of questions here. It was a great narrative that was written up and explained, your budget, the reasonings and the challenges and your priorities, so thank you for that.
Looking at those grants, the James Street pump station replacement of $1.15 million, President Biden did sign that into the federal budget. However, if it's anything like it was when he signed the transmission line earmark into funding, we won't see that money for another year. So he signed that about 2 months ago, so I'm gonna guess at this time next year, we'll get the check in hand so that we can start going out to bid at this time next year. But that's federal guessing on federal timeline, so we know it's in federal law, we just don't know when we're receiving the check for it yet.
Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, one second. I just, really quick, I just want to thank both of you, thank you, Mayor, for showing up and going through and putting together a very detailed plan, just like George stated. The work that you do is not easy on a day-to-day basis, but we appreciate you being available for questions and providing us answers in a speedy fashion. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Motion moved.
So moved.
So moved, second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.